The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on bundle payments, where we will discuss the strategies for your successful participation in the bundle payments program. My name is Shardul Mehta, and I'm a product manager here at Priscilla. Before we dive into the webinar, there are a couple of items that I would like to bring to your attention. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel. I will read them out loud at the end of the presentation for our presenter to answer. We will also share the slide deck and a recording of the webinar with you shortly. Now, I would like to introduce to you our presenter, Dr. Mansoor Khan. He is a 20-year veteran of the software and healthcare industries. He's a serial entrepreneur who has been developing advanced technologies and cutting-edge software since the mid-90s. Over the years, he has led teams that have developed technology and applications for disease surveillance, artificial intelligence, quality management, analytics, care management, and cost and utilization management. These efforts have won numerous awards over the years, including Black Book's Best Decision Support System for ACOs and Top 100 Artificial Intelligence Companies. Dr. Khan, please take it away.
Thank you, Shardul. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm very happy to present to you the latest iteration of CMS's efforts along the value-based care continuum, specifically about the bundled payment programs. We have a presentation today, and as Shardul mentioned, we are going to open up the questions at the end of the presentation. So please feel free to type your questions into the panel, and we will collect those and try to address all of them by the end of the presentation. So let's get the big question out of the way right out of the gate. So before we even talk about what bundle payment or the BPCI program is and how it works, why should you be interested at all? Well, fundamentally, the program is designed, at least at this early stage of the program, based upon the current target prices and spending, to allow the average episode initiator, and I'll define later on what an episode initiator is, to make approximately 100K per episode group per year in gain sharing by improving care and lowering costs. So it has CMS's goal is to design a mechanism which aligns all of the different stakeholders that provide care for a patient during an episode, such that quality of care is at least maintained and hopefully improved, costs are reduced, and that reduction in cost is shared with the care providers in the form of gain sharing. And we're seeing numbers that are of the order of about $100,000 per episode group per year for every episode group that an episode initiator selects. So having said that, let's get into the details of the program. So BPCI stands for the Bundled Payment Program for Care Improvement. This is actually the fifth in a series of models that CMS has been trying out starting back in, I believe, 2012 timeframe, when Model 1 was launched. So the Model 1 was focused on just the inpatient stay in an acute care hospital, and the way it was done was that CMS, basically just discounted the IPPS rates for that. Then they launched Model 2, which was much more sophisticated. It included the inpatient stay in an acute care hospital, plus the post-acute care and all related services up to 90 days after discharge. And they would measure the actual expenditures for that period, reconcile them against a target price, and either pay the difference to the episode initiator or charge them for it, depending upon whether there was a loss or a gain. Model 3, which came after that, was I think it was in parallel to that, was where the episode of care is triggered by the acute hospital stay, but it actually begins at the initiation of post-acute services. So this was a model that was focused only on post-acute services, and again, actual expenditures were reconciled against predetermined target prices. Model 4, which it's a very interesting one. So in Model 4, CMS makes a single prospective payment to the hospital for the episode, which lasts the entire inpatient stay, and then the hospital is responsible for paying whatever physicians and other entities might be involved in providing the care. All of these model 1 is actually completely finished and done with. Models 2, 3, and 4, I believe there's still parts of them are still running, but none of them are accepting new entrants. The latest program, which was launched at the beginning of 2018, is the BPCI Advanced program, and it's an evolution of Model 2 above. And this is the only model that is now accepting new entrants. And the rest of the presentation, we're going to focus on the BPCI Advanced model. So what is BPCI Advanced? So the characteristics which define the BPCI Advanced model are as follows. It's a voluntary model, and it's episode and not population focused. So unlike the ACOs, all the BPCI models follow a patient for the duration of an episode, and then they stop following the patient. So it's not the case where in an ACO, you have a defined population and you're caring for that population. In this case, you have a defined set of episodes, and any patient, Medicare patient, can fall into one of those episodes, and when the episode's over, they fall out of it. It's a single retrospective bundled payment, one risk track, and a 90-day clinical episode duration. So and I'll talk more about this later on, but there's an anchor stay and then the 90 days following that anchor stay. There are 29 inpatient episode groups and 3 outpatient-focused episode groups. This qualifies as an advanced APM, so it gives you the benefits of that in the MIPS program. Both hospitals and or physician group practices can participate in this by being episode initiators or conveners, and I'll define those terms further down. But what's interesting is that while they're in the program and they're delivering covering that episode, they still continue to bill under fee for service. So it doesn't disrupt the normal flow of financial flow for the participants. The incentive payments is partially, a portion of that is tied to performance on specific quality measures that CMS measures and reports on. It operates under a total cost of care concept. So when you take on an episode, you sort of own all of the costs associated with that episode through that 90-day post-discharge period. And CMS provides preliminary target prices for each episode group at the beginning of each year. So CMS will say, okay, you've selected chronic congestive heart failure, COPD, sepsis, and so here for your geography and for your hospital, these are the target prices. If your actual spend is below these target prices, you're going to make money. If your actual spend is above these target prices, you're going to owe us money. The model is designed to encourage clinicians to redesign care delivery by adopting a number of key initiatives. First of all, a big focus on best practices and in reducing variation from evidence-based standards of care. So there's a lot of emphasis on making sure that the care providers are following best practices and introducing evidence-based medicine as much as possible into the process. They're looking for providers to adopt continuous and timely decision support, provide a clinically appropriate level of services throughout the episode. So, there's a big emphasis on making sure that the quality of care does not deteriorate in any effort to manage or reduce costs. Care coordination is highly important in managing all of these, and CMS would like to see that happen. We recommend, and I believe CMS also recommends, dedicated care navigators to follow patients through the episodes. And we found that care management and care coordination tools that go beyond the EHR to allow cross-organizational coordination are very important to this, because a lot of the costs that occur are going to occur in the post-acute environment, and the ability to exchange information and knowledge in a timely manner with those entities is critical to success in this program. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of the BPCI Advanced program. So fundamentally, there are three types of entities that are involved in contracting for and running a bundled payment for care improvement program. The first set is the conveners. The conveners manage the program and bear the risk. Usually, the convener would be, say a corporate entity of some sort that has relationships with the actual care provider. So, for a hospital system, it could be the corporate entity that owns the hospitals. In an IPA, it could be the governing entity of the IPA or the governing entity of an ACO, that sort of thing. But there's really no restrictions on that. Almost anybody can be a convener, although typically it'll either be a hospital or a physician group. And their job is to enlist episode initiators and have multiple episode initiators. And because the conveners bear the actual risk of the in this program, it's highly recommended that they have multiple episode initiators. So if one of them loses money, another makes money, they can sort of blend risk across those multiple participants, and they're allowed to do that. The episode initiators are the actual entities, either hospitals or physician groups, that are responsible for managing the selected episode group. So these entities are the ones that are actually delivering the care, and they're sort of at the center of the actual execution of the program. And then the participants are any entities that provide care and share in any savings or possibly losses. So there's a difference between somebody providing care to a patient that is falling under one of the episodes and a participant sort of in this sense. So a participant in this sense is an entity. So there may be many physicians, for example, that are providing Part B billing, multiple SNFs that are touching the patients that are discharged from the hospital, but they are not all necessarily participants under the BPCI program. Participants are those off of those entities, those with whom the EI chooses to have a gain sharing agreement. And there's a lot of latitude that CMS provides to the conveners and to the EIs in terms of how they can share gains and with whom they can share gains. So typically, an EI will select those providers that have a disproportionate impact on the cares patients who are doing a lot of episodes, who are seeing a lot of patients in those episodes, and do gain sharing agreements with them, and they would be participants with a capital P in this context. So we have conveners, we have episode initiators, and we have participants. The work is all done by the episode initiators and the participants, and the convener is the entity that contracts with CMS and bears the risk. So who can participate? So as I said, for a convener, almost any entity can be a convener as long as they have the financial resources and the clinical know-how, but typically it's going to be either a hospital or hospital group or a physician group practice. However, only acute care hospitals and physician group practices can be episode initiators. And finally, participants are anybody that the episode initiators decides has an impact on the care of the patient and who is involved in the care. So it could be physicians, other practices, other hospitals, skilled nursing facilities, home care agencies, etc. So there's a wide spectrum of entities that could be participants, but the episode initiator has a lot of leeway in terms of who they wish to involve as a participant, and I mean participant with a capital P in this case. So one other question that comes up very, very quickly is that it's very possible that there are two separate episode initiators in a geography that are managing the same episode. So it's possible that a physician group is managing congestive heart failure, and there's a local hospital that is also in the BPCI program managing congestive heart failure. So if a patient shows up at the hospital and is admitted for CHF, who gets that episode? So CMS has defined the hierarchy under which determines who gets the episode. So the first priority goes to the physician group that submits a claim that includes the NPI for the attending physician. If there isn't one, then it goes to the PGP that submits a claim that includes the NPI of the operating physician. And if that isn't there either, then the acute care hospital where the episode that triggered where the services that triggered the clinical episode was furnished. So that's the order. First, the physician groups, and then the hospital will get that episode or credit for that episode. So some more details about the rules. So a BPCI advanced episode is structured to begin either at the start of an inpatient admission to an acute care hospital, we call that the anchor stay, or at the start of an outpatient procedure in the case of the episode groups, and I'll share a list of the episode groups, I believe, in the next slide. Or at the start of an outpatient procedure called the anchor procedure. The episodes last up to 90 days after the anchor end date, and CMS on a every 6 months, CMS collects all of the costs for the completed episodes in those 6 months, adds them up, compares them to the target prices, and then determines whether CMS owes that episode initiator or convener funds, or if that entity owes funds to CMS, depending upon whether that spend was above or below the target price for that set of clinical episodes. There are 29 inpatient and 3 outpatient episodes. And if you look closely at it, you'll notice that cardiology is a big component of it. Orthopedics is a big component of it, and hospitalists in general are a component of it. Those are probably the 3 specialties that have the largest component, largest number of episode groups in this listing. And this is, this will be available in the presentation for you later on if you want to look at it in more detail. CMS has also defined 7 quality measures that they will be collecting data on from claims, and they will be calculating a composite quality score, CQS, based on these. So there's no reporting, nothing that the entity has to do, but these are the episodes, these are the measures that CMS will be collecting on. 2 of them apply to all episodes, the all-cause hospital readmission and the advanced care plan, and the other, the remaining 6 apply to, remaining 5 apply to the specific specialties. And this quality score eventually impacts up to 20% of the gain that one can receive. So the last 20% or so of the gain will be, actually it's plus or minus 10% of the gain is tied to the quality score. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slides. So how does this actually work? So CMS, when you apply for this, for the program, after the initial application period, and I'll talk about the timeline in a second, CMS will return, after your application is filed and CMS has accepted the initial application, they will give back to you a large amount of data. So in 2018, they gave 3 years of inpatient, Part B, outpatient, SNF, DME, hospice, home health, the gigabytes of this data covering the period of 2014 to 2016. So this is the actual spend in all of those 32 episodes for each episode initiator that is applying to enter into this program. CMS also provides at the same time preliminary target prices for each episode group, and these are calculated through a very complex 18-step formula that CMS uses to account for different population risks, different geographies, different cost structures, etc. So they go through all of that, and then they calculate a preliminary target price for each episode group, which they also provide you along with this, with all of this data. What this allows each applicant to do is to then analyze this data and understand from this sort of which episodes make sense for them to bid on. Because this is a voluntary program, you get to pick and choose which episodes you want to work at. And because this is the early stages of the BPCI advanced program, there's actually a lot of low-hanging fruit. So what happens is, so they give the data, if you, whoever you're working with, typically you need to work with some external entity like Priscilla to analyze the data. But you analyze the data, and what fundamentally the analysis is focused around calculating the actual spend, comparing that to the target price, and figuring out for every episode group whether it's whether the entity is going to make a profit or a loss, and that profit or loss constitutes the savings pool. So what we do is we provide you graphs, for example, what you're seeing here. So let me talk a little bit about what this looks like, because it's a little hard to read, it's small. The horizontal axis there is counting the number of episodes. So this is the number of episodes historically that this entity has seen. And the vertical axis is looking at the post-anchor percentage. So the higher up a dot is, and each dot is an episode group. So you can probably see that green dot sort of in the middle left there says stroke under it. So each dot is an episode group. The color of the dot tells you whether that episode is making a profit or loss. Green means that it's making a profit. Red would mean it's making a loss. Gray means that there are not enough episodes to count. So in this case, and how high it is on the y-axis tells you what percentage of that spend was in the post-acute environment. And that's important to know, because that's where a lot of wastage occurs. You know, we've seen cases, many cases, where a standard length of stay for an episode at a SNF might have been 6 days, and the patient stayed there for 60 or more days. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. So typically what an episode initiator or an aspiring episode initiator would do is they would take the episodes that fall in the upper right-hand quadrant. So in this case, we're seeing that AMI, CHF, renal failure, simple pneumonia, and UTI fall in that top right-hand corner, and those are the episode groups that this entity should be bidding for, and that's eventually actually what they did bid for. And another fact, another interesting sort of side fact at this point is that the savings and loss is capped. So your loss will never be more than 20% of the revenue from any given episode group, and your gain will never be more than 20%. CMS has capped the gain and loss at 20% of the total revenue associated with any of the episode groups. So this sort of a chart lets you very quickly and easily identify what episodes you should be contracting with CMS for. So what is the saving pool? A little bit more details about that. So the saving pool actually has two components. It has an anchor component, which is which they refer to as the internal cost savings for the hospital. So this is any cost savings that might occur in the anchor stay. And they have the post-anchor period, which is referred to as the NEPRA, the net payment reconciliation amount if there's a profit, or the adjusted negative total reconciliation amount if it's a loss. So, and as usual, CMS has these wonderful acronyms. But so those are the two components of the savings pool, and you add those up to come up with the total savings pool. And CMS has given a lot of leeway to episode initiators to decide how they wish to share, or if they wish to share any of this, both the profit and the loss, with the various entities that are going to be involved in the care. And we'll at the end of the presentation, we'll end by showing you an example of how a program might be structured. But each EI, each episode initiator, need to have a written gain sharing agreement with all the details in it, a legally binding agreement with each participant. And there's another sort of hook here, in that no participant can be paid more than 50% of their fee-for-service billing. So if a physician did $10,000 worth of Part B billing, and their portion of the gain sharing comes out at $6,300, they will still only get $5,000. So CMS caps that. So whatever any entity's billing is to CMS, they can only their gain can only be the maximum it can be is 50% of whatever that fee for service was. And then finally, they apply the quality score, the composite quality score, CQS, when it becomes available after the end of the year, to that. So what CMS actually does is that they don't give you the full amount of your savings pool or your gain. They give you 90% of your gain. The other 10% they hold back, and after the quality scores are available, you will get that point. So if your quality score, God forbid, is 0, you would get nothing, and your gain sharing amount would be limited to 90% of whatever you were calculated as showing. If it was at 10%, you would get 100% of whatever your savings were, and if your quality score ends up at 99 or above, then you would get 20%, so you would end up at 110%. So you can swing plus or minus 10% from whatever your savings pool is, depending upon the quality score. And of course, the EI has the ability to tie, the quality score also into the gain sharing model, so that the providers have an incentive to make sure that they also are watching quality while they're delivering the care. So let's talk about sort of what are the areas that one should focus on to ensure success in this program. So of course, you want to make sure you pick the right episode, but once you're in the execution phase of the program, one of the key things is timely identification of patients that may be attributed to an episode group. So imagine this scenario: a patient comes in, they have an AMI admission diagnosis. They have an anchor stay. They're in the inpatient for 7 days. They get discharged. They go to a SNF. They stay in the SNF for 20 days. They get discharged from there, so they go home. So 27 days have gone by. The patient has gone home. The first claims data that's going to show up will be roughly 45 days after the initial claim was submitted. So if we assume the initial claim was submitted on the day of admission, the first claims data shows up 6 weeks later. And most of the tools available today, which look at claims analytics, will at that point analyze the data and tell you, yeah, this patient fell into this AMI episode, and oh, by the way, this is what the spend was, and you made money, you lost money, whatever. Not very useful, because by that time all the costs are baked in. There's nothing you can do about it. So the ability to identify the patient at admission and say, yeah, there's a high probability this patient is an AMI patient, so we should start following this patient immediately, is very, very important in sort of getting a good start into the program. Secondly, creating a single health record that is accessible to all acute and post-acute providers is also very important. So the ability to have a single record and share that record across the entire continuum of care for the full 90-day plus episode is critical. You have to have the ability to translate both the clinical and the claims data into clinically actionable information. And we highly recommend some sort of a real-time or near real-time decision support that is tailored to each episode group, be available to take that single record and to take the clinical and claims data and the actionable information and make sure it's available to the right person at the right time. You want the capacity to track the patients across care settings. So it's not just about what happens in the hospital. As a matter of fact, that is a smaller portion of it in general. A lot of it is about what happens after the patient is discharged. So the ability to communicate with the care providers and with the patient is a key capacity that has to be developed. One of the things that we encourage, and CMS also encourages greatly, is to appoint care coordinators or care navigators, at the episode initiator level. So each EI has at least a portion of, at least a part-time, if not a full-time person dedicated to following these patients, depending upon the volume they have. Make sure that accountability is assigned at each point where care providers are interacting with the patient. And of course, creating mutually beneficial relationships among providers, because in the end, it's all about the team that's providing the care, not just about any one individual entity. So the 2019 timeline is not yet available, but we can talk about and look at the 2018 timeline to get some inkling as to how this is going to flow. So in 2018, the initial requests for applications were released in early January 9th to be precise. The application portal opened soon thereafter, and the application portal closed on 3/12. So you basically had about 2 months to file the initial applications. CMS then, over the next few months, screened the applicants, and part of that process is last year in June, they released the historical spend data and the preliminary target prices for all of the applicants. And in July, they distributed the participation agreements. And that's the time between June and August is when a lot of activity happens, when the episode initiators, the applicants, have the chance to sort of review the data, decide what they're going to do, sign the agreements, identify participants. All of that stuff happens through early August. and then that is all delivered to CMS in the September timeframe, and then before the end of September, CMS announced the actual participants, and with the first cohort starting on October 1st, 18. So that's what historically happened. This year, the application period is going to start sometime very soon, and we expect that it'll close in sometime, I'm guessing, by late April. And the reason for the delay is that the first cohort start date is actually January 1, 2020, and not October 1. So we have between now and January 1 for all of this process to take place. And if you sign up with us, we'll keep you updated as this information becomes available, and send out emails once the applications, etc., are open. So let's take a look at an example for how this program has been implemented or could be implemented. So you could think of a corporate entity for, say, hospital system or for a large physician group. Becomes a convener. It files the application. It then selects the entities that are within its organization or those that it can work closely with to be episode initiators, EIs. Those EIs then have their data analyzed in sort of the mid-year period, and you select episode groups that are either have a positive impact going in, or are close to a positive impact, where the episode initiator feels that with some effort they can turn it around and get it into the green. And once that process is done, they also at the same time have to define a gain sharing agreement. So an example gain sharing agreement could be that whatever that net savings pool is after the quality scores are applied, the convener charges a small administration fee like 5%. The episode initiator, the EI, takes 40%. The physicians that are involved in the care share 35%, and the SNFs maybe share 25%. So that makes up the 100% of the pool. Of course, there's details around maximums allowed, et cetera, there, but that's a very typical sort of model. So in this example, the convener actually contracted for a care management system that went across the 17 different EHRs, inpatient and outpatient, they were using. So this was a large system with many different EHRs and different IT systems touching patient data. So they implemented one care management system that coordinated the data, collected data from all of those, applied decision support, et cetera, to it, and then they redesigned their care model based on these new capabilities, and by assigning care coordinators and care navigators to follow the patient from admission through the acute period. There were monthly cost and utilization meetings with each EI to kind of make sure that they were up to date, and they understood sort of what their what their practice patterns were, and where there were opportunities for savings. And then they also created both the IT systems and the legal structures to collaborate with the SNFs to ensure that the SNFs would provide timely information back to them into their care management coordination system, so that they would know what's going on with each patient. And at the same time, the SNFs would get access to preferred access to the patients, as well as they would get access to clinical data for the patients that that they were caring for. So there's a lot of details beneath this in terms of the actual agreements, but at a high level, this is a typical way to structure the program, so that there's sort of joint gain sharing and joint responsibility for ensuring the quality of care and reducing the cost of care for each episode. So a little bit about Priscilla, and then we'll go into the question and answer period. So Priscilla serves over 250 hospitals with population health, quality management, care management tools. Separate from that, we serve over 4,500 ambulatory physicians with similar capacity. We have 34 hospitals today that we're managing the BPCI program for, that covers over $750 million in payments. to those hospitals for those episodes. We touch over 20 million patients, over 60 million encounters. We have a pure SaaS platform. We have deep expertise in EHR data and integration. And our products at a very high level cover cost and utilization analytics, care management, care coordination, quality management, patient engagement, and telemedicine. In terms of the BPCI program itself, we divide this process into a two-stage or a two-phase process. The first phase covers the application period, which in this case would be all of calendar year 2019, where we can help you with the application, with episode selection, with gain sharing model design, with contracting, and then the execution phase itself beginning January 1, 2020, where we would help you with care redesign, care management, care coordination, patient engagement, and cost and utilization management tools. So a full tool set to monitor the patient from admission all the way through the end of the episode in real time, and all of the tools you need to actually set up and file the application successfully with CMS to participate in the BPCI Advanced program. Just a couple of more things about our platform. Our platform is really designed to be the sort of the digital platform for a large complex organization to work alongside their EHR. And, we take data from EHRs, for patient-reported data, consumer data, HL7 data, diagnostic data, and of course claims data. All of that gets rationalized in integration services there in a data warehouse, and then it goes through our Soliton AI engine. So every piece of data, no matter what the source, gets integrated into a single record, which is then instantly analyzed in the AI engine, which generates insights that are provider specific and episode or diagnosis episode specific, and then it goes through the different business modules and is exposed to our clients through either our own portal or through their EHR or other portals that they may be using. So just a word about that. And we, of course, have experience with almost all of the major EHRs, both inpatient and outpatient, in terms of integrating with them, collecting data, analyzing that data, and combining it into a single patient record for use by our partners and our customers. So I'll pause here. I think that's what I wanted to cover, and we can now start taking questions. So Shardul, please go ahead, take over, and we can start going through the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. We will now go ahead and answer some of the participants' questions. As a reminder, please feel free to type your questions into the question box in the control panel. Looks like we have a couple questions here. Dr. Khan, are these bundles going to become mandatory?
So there is no definitive answer to that, but the basic answer we believe is yes. So there are now 3 bundles that CMS has already announced that are going to be mandatory. Not out of these 3, but there's 3 bundles that are going to be mandatory in certain geographies in 2019. One of them is pharmacy focused, and the other 2, I believe, are oncology focused. So CMS is definitely moving, and Azar, the CMS HHS administrator, has specifically stated that yes, they do intend to make bundles mandatory. They have not yet specified the timeline or exactly what that process will be in implementing them, but yes, they will eventually be mandatory, which is actually important to know because right now it's pretty easy to have gains in this, and it's a good time to learn. Once they become mandatory, there'll be both downside risk, and it'll be much tougher if you enter it at that point.
Okay, thank you. Also, can hospitals who are in the Comprehensive Care for Joint Replacement Program apply for BPCI Advanced?
Yes, they can. There's really no restrictions on that. So even if you are doing that, there's no issue with that. You can definitely join.
Okay, and it seems a couple of the participants are curious about the next application period and when it would be closing.
So the next application period is starting now, but CMS has not yet announced the dates. So We estimate that it will start before the end of January and it will likely close before the end of April. And so, if we have an email list, we'll be sending out updates as this information becomes available. So all of the attendees will get periodic updates as CMS releases information on that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Khan. I think it looks like we've covered all the questions. Is there anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
Yes. So another thing is that ACOs are also eligible to participate in this program, and ACOs actually are probably very well positioned to succeed in this because they will tend to have all of the infrastructure for managing a bundle payment program, and many ACOs that are now beginning to carry downside risk. For them, this is a really good way to hedge that risk. Because at this point, even though there is downside risk in the BPCI program, the way the program is structured, it's highly likely that if with the correct choice of episodes, that most entities are going to come out ahead. So for ACOs, this is a great opportunity to sort of hedge their risk and join a program that that allows them to sort of re-up with the existing investments they've already made in infrastructure and processes.
Okay, great. Thank you. We will be sure to email.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to thank you very much for attending, and Shardul, go ahead with the wrap-up, please.
Sure. So we will be sure to email everyone the webinar slides and the recording within the next 24 hours. Thanks again for joining us. We appreciate you all taking the time out of your day. We hope to see you next time. Take care and have a great day.